It's salty season in the UK, which means there's not a great deal of classic car action to be had. So I thought I'd do a quick buyer's guide for you based upon my last 18 months worth of ownership experience on the Range Rover. The first thing I'm going to cover is engine issues. These are all, like the newest ones of these are now 12 years old. The first question to ask is, has it had an oil cooler? When the oil cooler packs up, what happens is you basically get the oil and the water mixed together, which causes a nasty emulsion mix in the water cooler bottle. People say the oil cooler warps, so change your whole oil cooler. I think all you need to do is change the seal at the bottom, which is probably about £20 part. But even if you do buy an aftermarket oil cooler, such as a Nissan's one, it's probably worth getting the genuine Jaguar Land Rover seal. It's a little squiggly thing, which I'll show you in a frame. If you're going to do the oil cooler, also do the O-ring that seats at the bottom of the water thermostat housing, because that is what I think causes the car to lose fluid when it's not running. So if you find a pool of fluid under your car, it could be the oil cooler or the thermostat housing O-ring. So do those two together. These cars all have DPFs, the 4.4 TDV8s. Well, the cars need to be run to keep the DPF clean. The other challenge that these have is they're all now just filling up with soot. If the DPFs are full, it's because there's too much soot in them. So that's nothing that the car can clean out. That actually needs the DPF to be taken off and cleaned out professionally. So the question there is, has the DPF been cleaned? One thing that my car suffered from on the engine was a error code that led to extreme restricted performance. It was showing a fuel pressure sensor issue. It was nothing to do with the fuel pressure sensor. It was actually the high pressure fuel pump. And that was the most expensive engine job I've had done on this. So I guess the question is, has the high pressure fuel pump been replaced? If not, then just consider the fact that my car needed it doing. So it's just a mechanical part that potentially is wearing out. One maintenance task that these will all need doing at around 100,000 miles is the auxiliary belt. If in the cold it squeals, then your auxiliary belt needs doing. The suggestion is you change the auxiliary belt and the tensioner. On my car, I changed the auxiliary belt, the tensioner, and all the pulleys that direct the auxiliary belt around. And of course also the much shorter, much less expensive fan belt as well. I should have replaced at the same time the alternator, which, as you may have seen from one of my other videos, I didn't, and the car left us stranded in the middle of France. But the reason you need to change the alternator at the same time is because you're putting a new belt on, you're putting a new tensioner on, so there will be actually more pressure pulling on that alternator. So if it's a really old alternator, it's much more likely to pack up fast, which I guess is what ours did. It probably lasted about another 3 months after I changed the auxiliary belts. That's engine. Next section, transmission. The one thing that won't show up in any MOT is the condition of the prop shaft. It has a central bearing in the middle of it with a rubber kind of support. That rubber support can't be seen. It's just hidden. So you'll only know that it's about to go when it starts to clatter. And if it really lets go, it'll be horrible. So, question to ask, has it had the prop shaft or the central prop shaft bearing replaced? At 100,000 miles, there's a recommendation that you change the transmission oil. Obviously, it's got 2 diffs and a central transfer box, which is changing those is a fairly simple task. It's a real easy DIY task. But changing the oil on the automatic gearbox is not quite so straightforward. It can be done, but there's 2 ways to do it. You either get it mega flushed, which is it gets plugged in and the oil gets squirted through with fresh oil. So the old stuff gets taken out and the new stuff gets put in at the same time. But that process does not change the oil filter in the gearbox, which is, I believe, part of the sump. So the second way is to take the sump off the gearbox, drop the oil out and change the filter. Okay, slightly more traditional way, but the question to ask of any of these that you're looking to buy is, has the gearbox oil been changed? Simple as that. Right, the next thing is wheels. The wheel nuts on these swell. So if you have a look at this, this is a wheel nut that I've had to shove a screwdriver into the socket to get it off, because the wheel nut inside the cover has actually swollen, which is a right pain. So that'll be changed. I've got 4 new ones, so I'm going to go around and select my worst nuts to change. But also the wheels, when I last had the tyres changed, I had 2 wheels that were buckled. One had previously been welded badly, so I needed the buckles taken out. The clue to whether your wheels are buckled, if you have a good look around the wheel for the amount of weight that's been stuck to the wheel. If there's loads of weight, it's likely that that weight is there to compensate, not for a tyre, but for a buckled wheel. So have a really good look around any wheels on the car that you're looking to buy. Of course, the other key thing with wheels is when you take it for a test drive, if there's a lot of vibration, then something's likely to be buckled. But we'll move on to suspension in a second. So suspension, it's got lots of arms, lots of rubber. Just have a really good listen, both when you're going slowly and when you're going faster. There should be no vibration at the steering wheel, and there should be no knocks and bangs when you're going slowly over either poor quality roads or speed bumps. The slower you go, the more likely you are to hear things. And also when you come to a stop, see if there's any kind of forward clonk, and when you release the brake, see if there's any release, and that suggests some of the front suspension arms also need changing. So the question to ask is, what suspension parts have been changed and how long ago? You all right, Joe? You chilly? Yeah. Right, moving on to the interior. These have heated and cooled seats. Both the heating and the cooling systems can fail, so you can check those out or see if they've been fixed. The other problem that seems to be coming up on these about now is the heater blower stops working. People will say it's just the final stage resistor, which is a thing with lots of spikes on it, looks like a hedgehog, called the hedgehog. If the final stage resistor has been changed, it's because the blower motor is on its way out, and somebody may have just changed the final stage resistor and not want to face the close to £1,000 bill that's necessary to change the blower motor. I've done it twice on my car. Twice is a bit annoying, but I made a mistake the first time. You can do it yourself, but again, the question to ask, has the blower motor been changed? One other interior thing to check is whether your wing mirrors still heat up. They seem to have a lifespan of about 8 years, where the heating elements just gradually deteriorate. The genuine Jaguar Land Rover ones were about £150 for the pair, but they make all the difference to the whole experience. The only other interior comment I've got is I've recently refitted my blower motor fan, and I fitted a Nissin's one, and it's definitely noisier than the original Valeo unit, which is the OEM Jaguar one. So it's not noisy, it's just a little bit more intrusive than the genuine one. But the Nissin's fan is £90, the genuine one is £280. So you pay your money and take your choice. Body exterior. It's all made out of aluminium, apart from the boot. So the boot rusts around these points here. This one's all right, but I think this boot has been replaced on this car because the paintwork is a slightly different shade. Although it's filthy dirty, the paintwork is a slightly different shade to the rest of the body. So I'm sure this boot has actually been changed. The key thing that if you're going to buy one of these, you will know that you get rust in this whole area here. Now, my theory, and you'll see that my wheel liners are outside of this metalwork. The vast majority of wheel liners are inside, which is, I think this is how they should have been fitted from the factory, because it actually, when the door closes, it kind of meets the rubber perfectly. You'll see a gap. But my theory is this was just too hard to do in production. On these rusty sills, the key, you can actually get underneath it and have a look to see what sort of state the inner sill lip is, but it does require jacking up the car and obviously having something to lie on. Yeah, and always be careful if you're getting underneath somebody else's car. But you can get an indication of the level of rust by the what you can see above this sill cover. You might notice that I've got two access points that I've actually drilled in my car. That's so I can easily just clip them off and squirt some Lanagard in the cavity. Not essential, because you can actually just clip this piece off, but my view is if it's easier to do, I'm more likely to do it more frequently. And then there's the basics. It needs to have had at least an annual service with an oil change, ideally every 10,000 miles. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure what the recommended oil change interval was on these when they were new. I suspect it was probably 20,000 miles. So which is why sometimes the first owner only actually did one service and the second owner maybe only actually did one service. So you can see cars like this that have only had 2 oil changes at 50,000 miles, which isn't great. If it has budget tyres fitted, when you go and look at the car, ask yourself why. This car had budget tyres fitted when I bought it. So I broke one of my own golden rules of buying a used car. Never buy a car with budget tyres on. It says a lot about how it's been maintained. But I really like the colour. The current tyres I have on are Pirelli SF2s because they're Alpine approved and they're fantastic in the wet, unlike the Pirelli all-season PNCS Jaguar Land Rover approved tyre, which I think, as you may have heard, I think it's just dangerous in the wet. So that is my recap of buying a 4.4 TDV8. It is a lovely car when it's working, and when it's working, it's just nice to be in. It's the only car that I think I've ever owned that my wife positively likes being driven in, and that says quite a lot. So don't buy one because you like the spec, don't buy one because you like the colour, don't buy one because it's cheap. Although, well, no, just don't buy one because it's cheap, because it won't be cheap in the long run. The other thing is have a look at the roof, because if the roof's clean, it means somebody's actually cared for it, because to clean the roof is a real pain. You actually have to you have to open the tailgate, clean the back really quickly, shut the tailgate before the water runs down the back windscreen. So it's not easy, and then you have to clamber around the different doors and clean all over the roof. So again, obviously if someone's like a bit stiff, as I am today, it's a difficult job. But I always think that if somebody cares for their car, they'll clean the roof. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope you found this little guide useful. Don't make the same mistakes that I did. And first of all, there are good ones of these out and about, but expect to pay today, beginning of 2025, I'd say about £15,000 for a really nice one. They can cost you more and they can cost you a lot less, but will probably cost you more in the long run. Anyway, thank you for joining. Hope you found it useful. Take care. Do you want to get a picture of me heel and toeing? Heel, toe. Heel, toe. It's not a technique you often employ in the automatic Range Rover.